Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from September 4th, 2020, and I'm recording this on March 5th, 2021. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. This week we got 18 books to look at, and we're looking at these really to try to understand what factors made them hot 6 months ago and what's happened since that's kept them going, made them drop back. So we all make a little better decisions about which books we chase, which books we just are patient on, and which books we just ignore because they're really just traps all together. So without further ado, let's dig into this week's list. And we're going to start with Haunted Mansion, number 1, from 2005. And this is basically rumors that Disney was once again going to try a Haunted Mansion movie. They made one years ago, right after the first Pirates of the Caribbean, that was kind of a flop. So we'll see if this happens and if it's any better. But it caused this original Haunted Mansion comic to jump to $10 to $25 raw. Now it's $10 to $15. A 9.8 did sell for $115, but it was the only 9.8 sale in the last 3 months. So yeah, this one's definitely down. It's definitely kind of an I'll be back. We'll see if anything comes of this, but you got lots of time to try to track down a Haunted Mansion number 1 if you really want it or believe in that particular project. Next, we have Cobra Kai. The Karate Kid saga continues, number 1. And this hit the list because the TV show jumped from YouTube TV to Netflix, and suddenly a whole bunch of people realized it existed. So it had gotten really rave reviews for the first 2 seasons on YouTube TV. It jumped over to Netflix. Then the first 2 seasons got released. Then the 3rd season got released. So there's been a ton of hype on Cobra Kai recently. And basically this caused this book to hit the list because sales numbers jumped crazy, but it was still only going basically for cover price when Tom and Key Collector put it on the list. But now it's going for $5 to $20. 9.8 will run you just under $100. So yeah, this one is up from when it actually hit the list. Not as many sales probably right now, but been a lot of momentum when season 3 came out on Netflix, and a lot of momentum around Cobra Kai right now. People are really loving the show, so this comic has continued to trend upward. Next, our last option news is going to be 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank, number 1, and basically it had been rumored that people were trying to option it and everything else, and it finally got optioned, so it hit the list again after it had hit it, gosh, I want to say not quite a year ago it was on the list. I forget now exactly how long ago it's been, but it's been a while before it hit the list when people were first talking about it. 6 months ago it was going for $10 to $15. Now it's going $10 to $25. Most sales are still in that 15-ish range, but yeah, there's occasional sales that are a little higher. 9.8, interestingly enough, there's only been 2 recent sales, one for $120 and one for $42. One was a buy it now, the $120, the $42 was an auction, so there's not a lot of interest in this, although there is still some interest. I kind of debate on what to do with this. I put it as kind of steady, kind of an I'll be back, because you can still get it for that $10 to $15 range, although occasionally it does go for more. We'll see if anything happens with this, if this actually comes to fruition or not. Next, we got several covers that we're going to talk about, and first up is Miles Morales, Spider-Man number 18. This is the Ron Lim 1 per store birthday variant. And it released, this was going for $60. Like everything Miles, this was very hot when it first came out. Now it's going 15 to 30, so less than half, quarter to half of what it was back then. 9.8 can be had for $75 to $125. Although I will say the most recent 9.8 sale was right at $200 at $199, but the vast majority have been in that $75 to $125 range over the last several months. So overall, this one's down. Proved to be a bit of a trap. We'll see if that last 9.8 sale, it doesn't appear to have affected raw sales since it happened. We'll see if it affects sales going forward or if it was just an outlier or somebody trying to bump the price a little bit. So our next cover is Batman 92, the 1 per store variant. So several months after the original They released Batman 92. They released this white version of the 1 for 25 cover, or the black and white version of the 1 for 25 cover of the original release, as a one per store thank you kind of thing. Pre-sale, there was a sale of this for $750, which was just ridiculous. At release, most of the sales were running $200 to $350, so it was a pretty wide range. It hadn't really settled exactly what it was going to go for. Now it's going $80 to $120 for the most part for raw sales, although somebody did pay $265 for a raw copy, which is weird because 9.8 will run you at $225 to $275. So this one is another one definitely down. You could argue I'll Be Back has still got really good value, but it's definitely a trap compared to the prices it was back then. Just hasn't maintained. I think there's still some interest in Punchline. Her first appearance in Hell Arisen is still doing well, but overall she's cooled a little bit. We'll see how much they continue to use her versus the crazed hype at the beginning. Next we have Ironheart #1, the second print. This is the first kind of self-titled Ironheart series. But the second print hit the list because basically somebody said, hey, these are kind of rare. And it jumped from a $5 book to a $350 book just because there were reports that this was actually hard to find and pretty rare. Now, there's quite a few listed on eBay. I mean, not a ton, but there's several. But now it's going $100 to $250 for raw copies. 9.8s are still bringing $400 to $500. So another one that's down, but another one that's maintained really good value. So definitely some interest in this character, knowing that she's coming to the MCU via a television show, at least at some point. Next, we're going to kind of get into comic buzz. And first up, we have Batwing #19, first appearance of Luke Fox. This had everything to do with people speculating that he was going to be the next Batman. We have now found out they were specking on the wrong Fox child, that it was Tim. And basically, back then, all the speculation that he was going to become the next Batman made this jump to a $175 to $200 book. Interestingly enough, before the news came out that he was the next Batman, it was still doing $100 to $130 or to $150 for raw copies. Now it's $50 to $80 on the very few sales that have happened since that he was not the next Batman. 9.8s were still doing $300 to $400 before the news came out that it was Tim and not Luke. Now there's only been one sale since then, and it was for $285. My expectation is this book is going to continue to come back. There's been very few sales after we found out for sure who the next Batman was, and it wasn't Luke. So this one's definitely down and headed down on the trend line. Next, we have A Tomahawk #0. Now, this book has been on the list a couple of times over the years. Whenever Kate has kind of mentioned it as a possibility of getting optioned or something, but nothing's ever really happened with it. So people jump on it and then they forget about it and drops back down to nothing for the most part. Well, this rise happened because Kate's put out on Twitter, I believe, a statement saying a tomahawk would rise again. So people started jumping all over this book because, Donna Kate says. And basically it went from being basically a cover price book back up to a $25 book. Now it's still going 10 to 20. 9.8s recently going for around 70. So this is another one that's down. Did not plummet all the way back to cover price this time. But because I think people think something might happen, but we'll see. So far there's been no real news with the Tomahawk other than Kate's sort of, I feel like, kind of trolling fans a little bit. Next up we have It Eats What Feeds It, #1, the second print. So this was kind of a hot indie out of the gate, and people were jumping on the second print on the secondary market for $15 to $25. The catch was, and CBSI even reported this, you could still go online with the websites and order the second print for cover. Like, you could still order it online from their shop and not have to pay the secondary market. So now it's a $1 to $10 book. It really didn't turn out to be a rare second print. 9.8 went for basically $40. 9.9s went for $30. 9.8s went for $100. 9.9s went for $150. 9.9s went for $200. 9.9s went for $250. 9.9s went for $275. 9.9s went for $200. 9.9s went for $250. 9.9s went for $200. 9.9s went for $250. 9.9s went for $200. 9.9s went for $250. 9.9s went for $200. 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 9. So this one turned into definitely a trap and definitely well down. Next, we're going to move into some MCU sort of related. This is the Sony side of things. And we have Amazing Spider-Man number 4 from 2014, the first appearance of Silk. And this had everything to do with rumors and reports that Sony was working on a Silk TV show. So basically, this caused the 9.8 to jump up to a $300 to $315 book. So it jumped to above 300 after it had been running around $225, something like that. Now it's a $100 to $150 book for raw copy, which has been pretty steady over the whole period. And 9.8s are currently at $300 to $325, so very steady. But this was definitely an I'll be back, because in November, December, you could have gotten it a 9.8 for around $200 to $225 again. It had dropped back. Raw copies had stayed right in that little over $100 range pretty firmly the whole time. But the 9.8s had dropped back to just over $200. But now, more rumors, more thought process on this after everything's been going up, and this book has jumped up to a $300 book again for a 9.8. Next, we have more Silk. We have Amazing Spider-Man number 1 from 2014. This features Cindy Moon in cameo of her, the scene where she gets bit by the spider. We don't really meet her beyond that. And back then, this was basically, there was just a bunch of sales on it. $5 copies for $5 for raw copies. 9.8s were going for $90. And I'm going to call this one steady too. It's still going kind of 5 to 15-ish for a raw copy. 9.8s are running 50 to 90, so 9.8s are actually down a little bit. Raw copies are up slightly. Overall, this is pretty much right where it was at 6 months ago. And so that's kind of, there's so many. This number 1 was a high print book. It is a cameo, but the huge print on this is really what's kept it from really kind of jumping. People have targeted more number 4, her first full, and actually the next book on the list more so, which is Silk number 1 from 2015, her first solo series. This is the A cover. Back then, raw copies were going 15 to 20. 9.8 went from $199. Not a lot of 9.8s yet of this book since it's on the market, but now it's a $15 to $25 book, so right in that same range for raw copies. 9.8s are actually well down, $100 to $125, but the vast majority of sales are those raw books. So this one's also been pretty steady. So everything Silk related here has been pretty steady. My guess is, I know there was recently some additional rumors of a potential casting and some other stuff that this is going to happen. So we'll see if this book takes another jump here in the near future. Or any of those 3 books for that matter. The last 6 books on the list have everything to do with sad news and how the market reacts to that. And this was the week that Chadwick Boseman passed away. So there's a bunch of Black Panther related stuff here at the end of the book, or end of the list. First up is Black Panther number 1 from 1977, the first solo appearance of Black Panther. Him being in the news, this happening, caused a little bit of a run on this book. On average, raw copies were going for around 120. 9.8 hit $1,000. Now raw copies are down 50 to 100. But 9.6s have been pretty steady around the $400 range, which is what they were there. 9.8s had actually been $1,000 to $1,400 over the last few months. $1,400 in January was the only 9.8 sale in January. But then in February, there's a sale for $4,500 on eBay. I don't know what to think of that. Is that market manipulation? Is that real? There's been some books that have jumped like that recently. That Giant Size X-Men and some other stuff have jumped. I'm not sure what would have caused this one to jump that much, from $1,400 to $4,500. But yeah, there's something going on there. It'll be interesting to watch this. So raw copies were down, but 9.8 appears to have maybe quadrupled in this last sale. So overall, this is probably an I'll be back. You can probably track down a decent raw copy and kind of avoid that 9.8, whatever's going on there. But yeah, this one was kind of hard to judge what exactly is going on with this book. Still a popular book, still a big key. Even though it appears they're not going to recast, that they're just going to move on without him. Next up, we have Rise of Black Panther number 1. The from 2018, the movie variant, and obviously based on this cover, you can tell why people were chasing this one. This $5 book became a $80 to $100 book. It has cooled significantly since. It's down to a $30 to $40 book. 9.8 is going 60 all the way to 250. So there's a super wide range on auctions and buy it nows, and people paying a wide range of prices on this book, and asking a wide range of prices on a 9.8 of this book. So, but overall, this one's down. It was a bit of a trap. There's always a rush. It's kind of like when you get a trailer, but there's always this rush to buy stuff related to somebody when they pass away. And then usually they settle out at a higher value than they were before, but lower than the immediate rush around their passing. So yeah, it happened with Carrie Fisher stuff. It happened with Chadwick Boseman stuff. It happened with Stan Lee stuff. So it's just kind of the nature of it. But yeah, still a very good book. Still a cool cover and a little piece of history there. So next we're going to move into where the speculation immediately went when he passed, which was Shuri. And first up, we have Claws of the Panther, #1 from 2010, which is just a cool Stephanie Hans cover. This is a 1 in 10 cover of Shuri as Black Panther. Back then, it jumped to $125 plus. Now it's a $30 to $80 book for a raw copy. There's only been one recent 9.8 sale because there's really not many 9.8 copies out there. That one sale went for $700, which is a ton for a $30 to $80 book. So, but yeah, my guess is it probably, if 9.8 start hitting the market, it probably won't sustain that high value. But the raw copies are definitely down from where they were. Still a lot of buzz around Shuri, just not quite the buzz that initial speculation around his death and what was going to happen. Next we have Black Panther #1 from 2009. And this is the Lashley wraparound variant. And this shows one of a couple of covers of this particular book that shows Shuri as Black Panther. Now, this was before people, when they saw the cover, didn't actually know if it was her or not, because it doesn't actually get revealed till issue 5, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this particular cover was going for $55 for raw copies. 9.8 hit $225. Now it's $30 to $70 for raw copies. 9.8s are going $2 to $250. So this one's been very steady and right in this range this whole time and since the news. So still her first cover, well, tied with another one as her as Black Panther, because another cover of this also shows her as well. But yeah, still a high demand book. Because people are thinking this is where they're going. Next, we have Black Panther #5, which I just talked about, which is her first appearance as Black Panther. So it was issue 5 of that same run before we actually found out that it was her that was being shown back on the cover, and she actually becomes Black Panther. Back then, raw copies were going for $100, 9.8s for $340. Raw copies have dropped back a little bit, $50 to $100. 9.8s have went up just slightly. They're going $350 to $400. So again, I call this one pretty steady. Everything's kind of in that same range. You can still get nice raw copies of this modern book for under $100. So definitely a book maybe that you still want to potentially go after. And then finally, our last book of the week is Black Panther #2 from the 2005 run, the first appearance of Shuri. Back then, a 9.8, basically. Week before all the news came out, 9.8s were going for $250. The day after the news came out, they were going for $500. By the time they put the list together, they were up to $800 for 9.8s of this book. Now 9.8s are $500 to $600, so they come back a little bit. Raw copies are going for the $100 to $200 range. So this book has come back a little bit. My expectation is when we get for sure news about Black Panther 2 that this is the direction we're going, which we might not get till right before the movie comes out, this book is going to surge again. But for now, it's definitely a little bit more affordable price than it was right after the news, although still a very valuable book. So that is this week's list. Like I said, it was dominated by books related to Black Panther news. We had 3 books related to Silk and her possibility of having her own show. Had a few covers scattered in there and a few option news. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.